Now, the question will always arise. The question will always arise whether Achilles is based on a real person. Most of us think he was a mythological Greek hero. The truth is that there may well have been a real Thessalian warrior, later mythologized by semi literate people. The story goes that his mother, Thetis, made him invulnerable by dipping him in the river Styx while he was still an infant. Who destroyed the Troy in the Trojan War? Cinematic expedition under Blegan concluded that Troy villa was very likely the capital of King Priam, described in Homer's Iliad, which was destroyed by the Greek armies of Agamemnon. The principal antagonist is King Agamemnon, who abuses his power and betrays Achilles by stealing the warrior's favorite war prize, the young maiden Briseis. Achilles sees Agamemnon's act as both a personal betrayal and a sign of the king's failure as a leader. Although Achilles is reconciled with Agamemnon, his other actions in books 19 and 20 indicate that he has made little progress as a character. He still dominates a tendency towards the thoughtless rage that has brought so many Achaeans to their deaths. Why does Zeus not save Hector? Zeus considers having Hector, both Athena persuades him that the world mortal's time has come. Zeus places Hector's and Achilles' respective fates on a golden scale, and indeed Hector sinks to the ground. Whereas partly because of the strange circumstances of her birth, Athena is often cited as Zeus' favorite child. He also greatly admired her strength of character and fighting spirit. Some believe that Athena was Zeus' firstborn child, which might somewhat unfairly suggest why he chose her as his favorite. So now, why didn't Zeus punish Athena? My understanding was Athena escaped punishment because she was Zeus' favorite child and found it easy to escape punishment in situations like these. A daughter of Zeus and a patron of human ingenuity, fables and knocks. Athena is the one who first sent Odysseus on his wanderings as a part of the punishment for a desecration of a temple by one of the Greek warriors of Troy. The Greek god Apollo was angry with Achilles because Achilles killed Apollo's son. He fought and killed Penthesilea, the queen and the Amazons. After Achilles' death, the heroes Odysseus and Ajax competed for Achilles' armor. Odysseus won and gave the armor to Achilles' son. One of 12 Olympians, Apollo was cast down from Olympus and turned into a human named Lester by Zeus after the war against Gaia in the blood of Olympus. Zeus blames him for encouraging his descendant, the augur Octavian, to follow his dangerous path and for prematurely revealing the prophecy of seven. As mentioned earlier, Apollo killed a serpentine named Python, who was the child of the primordial god Gaia, Gaia. Python was ordered by Hera to kill Leto, Eletio, Apollo's mother, for Zeus's act of adultery against her. Because of this, Zeus had no chance but to punish Apollo to purify him. Always there's a question, how many husbands did Helen of Troy have? After Paris was killed, his brother Deiphobus married Helen. Laurie McQuire, writing in Helen of Troy from Homer to Hollywood, lists the following 11 men as husbands of Helen in ancient literature, proceeding from the canonical list in the chronological order to the five exceptional ones. Fierce Menelaus. Did Helen of Troy fall in love with Paris? Paris chose Aphrodite and therefore Helen. Helen was already married to King Menelaus of Sparta, a fact Aphrodite neglected to mention. So Paris had to raid Menelaus' house to steal Helen from him. According to some accounts, she fell in love with Paris and left willingly. He sailed to Sparta, entered Menelaus' palace as his guest, and unseen as by the king, whispered sweet nothings in his wife's lovely ear. Helen did not resist, for Paris turned heads with his fine looks and fancy clothes, and Aphrodite filled her with desire for him. So Troy was an ancient city located in the present-day Hisarlik, Turkey. It is the best known as the setting of the Greek myth of the Trojan War. So Homer's Iliad is usually thought of as the first work of European literature, and many would say the greatest. It tells part of the saga of the city of Troy and the war that took place there. In fact, the Iliad takes its name from Ilios, an ancient Greek word for Troy, situated in what is Turkey today. This story had a central place in Greek mythology. So the poem deals with a very short period in the 10th year of the Trojan War. This sometimes surprises modern readers who expect the whole story of Troy. As for the instance in Wolfgang Petersen's 2004 film Today. But Homer and other early poets confined their narrative to particular periods in the war, such as its origins, key martial encounters, the fall of the city, or the returns of the soldiers in Greece. There is no doubt that Homer and other early poets could rely on a very extensive knowledge of the Trojan War among their audiences. The central figure in the Iliad is Achilles, the son of Peleus, a mortal aristocrat, and Thetis, the sea goddess. He comes from the north of Greece and is therefore something of an outsider because most of the main Greek goddess in the poem comes from the south. Achilles is young and brash, a brilliant fighter, but not a great diplomat. When he gets into dispute with Agamemnon, the leading Greek prince in the war, and loses his captive princess Briseis to him, he refuses to fight and remain in his camp. He stays there for most of the poem until his friend Patroclus is killed. He then explodes back onto the battlefield, kills the Trojan hero Hector, who had killed Patroclus, and mutilates his body. There is a sort of humility in his crime, and therefore he is not at all acclaimed as a great hero for the heinity of his crime. So we find that he he stays there for most of the poem until his friend Patroclus is killed. He then explodes back in the battlefield, kills the Trojan hero Hector, who had killed Patroclus, and mutilates his body. The Iliad ends with the ransom of Hector's body, but his old father Priam, who embarks on a mission to Achilles' camp in the gloom of the night to get his son's body back. It is worth noting that the actual fall of Troy, via the renowned stratagem of Greeks, hidden within a wooden horse, is not described in the Iliad, although it was certainly dealt with in their other poems. All of this takes place under the watchful gaze of the Olympian gods, who are both actors and audience in the Iliad. Olympians are divided over the fate of Troy, just as the mortals are in the Iliad. In the Iliad, the Trojan War is cosmic conflict, not just one played out at the human level between Greeks and non-Greeks. Ominously for Troy, the gods on the Greek side, notably Hera, queen of the gods, Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, and Poseidon, god of the land and sea, represent a much more powerful force than the divine supporters of Troy, of whom Achilles, the archer, paid and god of Apart, is the main figure. So the Iliad is only one poetic work focused on the war of Troy. Many others have not survived, but just such is its quality and the depth that it had a special place in antiquity and probably survived for that reason. We know virtually nothing about Homer and other whether he also created other poems in his name. The Odyssey, which recounts the return journey of Odysseus from the Trojan War to the island of Ithaca. The Iliad was probably put together around 700 BC or a bit later, presumably by a brilliant poet immersed in a traditional skill of oral composition, that is Homer. This tradition of oral composition probably reaches back hundreds of years before the Iliad. So early epic poetry can be a way of maintaining the cultural memory of major conflicts. History and archaeology also teach us that there may have been historical Trojan War at the end of the second millennium BC at Hisarlik in western Turkey, although it is very unlike the one that Homer describes. So the Iliad was composed as one of the continuous poem. It is in its current arrangement most likely after the establishment of the Alexandrian library in early 3rd century BC. It is divided into 24 books corresponding to 24 letters of the Greek alphabet. It is a metrical form known as dactylic hexameter, a meter also associated with many other epic poems in antiquity, such as Odyssey and the Iliad, the Roman epic by Virgil. In the Odyssey, a bard called Demodocus sings on request in an aristocratic context about the wooden horse at Troy, giving a sense of the kind of existence Homer might have led. The language of the Iliad is a conflation of different regional dialects, which means that it doesn't belong to a particular ancient city, as most of the ancient Greek texts do. It therefore had a strong resonance throughout the Greek world and is often thought of as a pan-Hellenic poem, a possession of all Greeks. Likewise, the Greek attack on Troy was a collective quest drawing on forces from across the Greek world. Pan-Hellenic, therefore, is central to the Iliad. A central idea in the Iliad is the inevitability of death, as also with the earlier epic of Gilgamesh. The poignancy of life and death is enhanced to the fact that the victims of war are usually young. Achilles is youthful and headstrong and is a goddess for a mother. But even he has to die. We learn that he had been given a choice, a long life without heroic glory, or a short and glorious life in war. So his choice of the latter marks him out as the heroic and gives him a kind of immortality. But the other warriors too, including the Trojan hero Hector, are prepared to die young. So the gods, by contrast, don't have to worry about the dying, but they can be affected by death. Zeus' son, Sarpedon, dies within the Iliad, and Thetis has to deal with the imminent death of her son Achilles. After his death, she will lead an existence of perpetual mourning for him. Immortality in Greek mythology can be mixed blessing. So the Iliad has also much to say about war. The atrocities in war at Troy are committed by Greeks and Trojans. Achilles commits human sacrifice within the Iliad itself and mutilates the body of Hector, and there are other atrocities told in other poems. The Trojan saga in the early Greek sources tells of the genocide of the Trojans, and the Greek poets explore some of the darkest impulses of human conduct in war. In the final book of Iliad, Achilles and Priam is the most poignant settings. reflect upon the fate of human beings and things they do to one another. So we see that the Iliad that we so much talk about, the great epic, and of course, we even try to find out whether it is a primary or a secondary epic. Primary epic is also known as oral or primitive. On the other hand, secondary epic is also known as literary. Primary epic belongs to oral tradition. It is composed orally and recited. In some cases, written down later, but the secondary epic is written down at the start. Beowulf, the only English epic. Iliad are the examples of primary epic. And Paradise Lost by Milton is the example of secondary epic. A primary epic is a type of epic through which the epic tradition was evolved. The secondary or literary epic is the epic which followed the tradition of the primary epic. In a primary epic, the episodes taken from oral traditions are linked with one another to make a longer story.